Okay, so Apple announced a bunch of new hardware today, but the things that were most interesting to me were the Mac Studio, which is a new, very powerful desktop computer, and then the Studio Display, which is a monitor that they launched alongside with it. Now that Mac Studio is very powerful, but it's also incredibly small. It comes in at around 3.5 liters, which is super small for a high performance system like this. Like I like ITX builds. Most of my PCs have been put into very small cases, and the smallest I've ever had was an 8-liter case from Loki, the Ghost S1. And this Mac Studio is half that volume. It's incredibly small. Now inside, it looks like the space is very well used. It's not half empty like the M1 Mac Mini. It's got powerful hardware in there, along with an interesting thermal system. It looks like 2 blower fans that suck air from the bottom and exhaust it out the back. So you can equip this system with an M1 Max chip or the new M1 Ultra chip. So we're familiar with M1 Max we saw on the MacBook Pros. It's a very impressive chip, right? But this new M1 Ultra is on a whole nother level. So this is essentially 2 M1 Max chips that have been fused together with this ridiculously high bandwidth connection called the Ultrafusion Interconnect. And the whole idea behind it is that by having such a high bandwidth between these two chips, the throughput between them is super, super high, and the latency is close to zero, that the system and developers can treat this system as one chip. And that's what makes it special, because the whole idea of multi-CPU systems has existed for a really long time, right? Just multi-processors, one big motherboard, like servers do it, lots of systems do it, but you can't treat those multiple CPUs as one thing. M1 Ultra can. So you end up with a chip with double everything, double the CPU cores, double the GPU cores, double the memory bandwidth, and double the power, but hopefully with double the performance. So Apple showed a bunch of their performance comparison charts, and those are honestly difficult to read too much into because you never really know what they're using to test this to get those charts. But the general takeaway is that this M1 Ultra is incredibly powerful, and apps that can take advantage of multi-threaded performance will really benefit from this new chip. And in terms of the GPU, they're comparing performance on the M1 Ultra to an RTX 3090, and it's coming out on top, like better performance with less energy consumed. Now, I did notice one thing in the spec list. The M1 Max equipped Studio is significantly lighter. It's 5.9 pounds, whereas the one equipped with the M1 Ultra is 7.9 pounds. Like that 2-pound difference is massive in a form factor like this. Like I'm assuming the big portion of it has to be a bigger heatsink, right? There's just more heat coming off of that thing, and they have to equip it with a beefier thermal system to vent it off. But 2 pounds is a lot of metal for extra heatsink. I feel like there has to be more to it. Like maybe the power supply is bigger on the M1 Ultra. Who knows? We'll see. But I want to talk about pricing for a minute. So the price on these systems, like it's $2,000 for the M1 Max equipped one, and if you go to the M1 Ultra, starts at $4,000. $5,000 if you want to max out the GPU. But my initial reaction to this pricing was like, holy crap, this is expensive, right? But here's the thing, when you have an Apple logo and you stick the Studio moniker onto it, like it's gonna be expensive. There's no way this was gonna be cheap, right? But when you actually think about it, and before the clowns go into the comments are like, Dave's an idiot, this is super expensive. It is, I'm not saying it's cheap, but 3 years ago, the Mac Pro, the cheese grater one, it was like $6,000 to start, and if you added components to it, like the Xeon chip at the top end was like another like $6,000 or $7,000, and you throw in the GPU, that was another $4,000 or $5,000. Like it was extraordinarily expensive. It was almost recreational to build that system out and be like, how expensive can I make this thing? Because it was crazy expensive, and because it was so expensive, so few people bought that thing. But this system, this new Mac Studio, it's priced at this price point where like professionals look at it and be like, that's very reasonable. Like if your career is to like make money and do things with your creative work, their pricing is expected, but at the same time reasonable. It's kind of confusing to me. Like I'm looking at the price and I want to hate it, right? I'm like, $4,000, what the hell? That's so expensive. But at the same time, it's like, that's kind of cheap for what that is. Anyways, I'm gonna move this conversation over to the Studio Display. So this is a 27-inch 5K display, and it costs $1,600, and it comes with a stand that you cannot adjust the height on. If you want to, you can pay the extra $400, and then now you have a height adjustable stand. It's a lot cheaper than the Pro XDR display, but I have some thoughts about the pricing. Now I have the Pro XDR display, and this is the stand from it. This was $1,000. This is a review unit I got. I haven't sent it back. Don't tell Apple. This is a very expensive piece of stand, it's a piece of metal. Now, I'm not gonna justify that it's like, oh, this is worth $1,000. I'm not saying that, but I will say that this is incredibly difficult to make. Like if you look at the machining and the kind of weight that this thing can hold and how sturdy it is and the mechanism behind it, this is, again, I'm not saying it's worth $1,000, but I can see why it's priced at $1,000. But I am surprised and honestly a little bit disappointed that they use this same kind of mechanism on this new display, because this is supposed to be a more entry-level affordable option, not a $5,000 display with a $1,000 stand. They don't need to make these super fancy stands. Like, why are you using that same mechanism and that kind of pricing on a mid-range display? It's crazy. I feel like there's no need to go ham on the stand, but they did. So this display is 60 Hertz. There's no ProMotion, and it's not mini LED. It's got no HDR. They can't get super bright like the XDR display. That can hit 1,000 nits sustained, 1,600 at the top end. This is a 600 nit panel. I don't know if it can go higher, but that's the listed 600 nits. And that means no real HDR. And on a creative display, and they're showing like the marketing material where they got people making movies on this thing, it's like, I felt like they would have gone brighter with this panel. There's a built-in webcam and it supports center stage, but there is no Face ID. Now, I don't know if there's kind of technical obstacles or security obstacles when it comes to putting Face ID on a computer like this, because they tend not to. It's only tends to be for the phones, but there's a lot of bezel. I feel like they could have put it in there if they wanted to without a notch. But yeah, no Face ID. It does have built-in speakers, which presumably have great sound quality. Apple is saying that these are the best sounding speakers they've ever had on a Mac, but a 60 Hertz panel with no HDR and no Face ID for $1,600 without even height adjustability, that's deep. Like, there's just so many good displays out there on the market that, I don't know, we'll have to see. But I do think it's a nice looking display, probably better than most of the panels out there. The back of it doesn't have like that cheese grater look, if that's what you were looking for. But yeah, there you have it. So the Studio display and the Mac Studio. I don't know. I want to see what this thing can do when I get it in, because that kind of computing power in a 3.5 liter box is unheard of, really. Okay, hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thumbs if you liked it, subs if you loved it. I'll see you guys next time.